All right, so let's now look at consumer and producer surplus, right? So we'll be looking at consumer and producer surplus. So we actually introduced the concept of marginal utility, right? And the thing to do with the diminishing marginal utility. We talked about utility being the satisfaction and marginal being that extra satisfaction, right? That additional satisfaction for doing something. So marginal utility derived by the difference consumer from the consumption of a unit quantity of a good will vary, right? As a result, they may be able to buy the good at a prevailing market price lower than the price they were prepared to pay. So the thing with marginal utility is about that extra or the additional satisfaction you get from consuming an additional unit of good. So it will definitely vary from one person to another, consumer to another consumer. But in a practice, we've noticed that uh, this utility will be diminishing. That's why the concept of what diminishing marginal utility, right? So if I say that if you are thirsty, you take the first glass of water, you get the highest satisfaction. The second, not as much. The third, so the satisfaction is actually decreasing. So knowing that this happens, right? Right? A person would not be willing to pay the next cup of water a higher price than the next cup of water, right? So the thing is, I'll be willing to pay 100 kwacha for this one, even if I know it's overpriced, right? But because I really need it, I'll pay, right? Now, because now my satisfaction is getting lower, I will not, for the next glass of water, I will not be willing to pay more than the market value, right? I might choose to pay lesser, right? Going forward, that's basically how it works. That's why you will see oftenly in restaurants, right? Or ice cream parlors, right? They will say that, all right, you pay, for example, the first cup of or ice cream, right? The full market price. If you buy an extra, right, you get a discount. Why? It's because you do not want you basically you get less satisfaction. So you will not be willing to pay as the full price. So to still motivate you to buy, they are giving you at a discount, right? Because they just want because as it is, right, you will not be prepared to pay as much. So that's the concept of marginal utility and how it basically changes every time. Diminishing marginal utility. So let's look at consumers surplus, right? So this is the difference between the price the consumer is willing to pay and the price consumer actually pays. So the difference is what is called consumer surplus. So the difference between the price the is willing to pay and how much he actually pays, right? That's the consumer surplus. The difference is what we're calling the consumer surplus. While the producer surplus is the difference between the price the producer is willing to supply at and the price he actually received. That's producer surplus. So the difference between what you're willing and what you actually pay or receive is what is called the surplus, right? The surplus, right? So basically that's it. So this concept can be illustrated in these diagram, right? So we have basically here the uh, supply curve. As you know, it goes like that. The consumer, the demand curve goes like that. So at this place, we know this is what? The equilibrium. This is the equilibrium. So this area right here is what it represents the the what is what is represented by the consumer surplus, because this is basically the demand curve, right? You can see we're talking about mpaka hapa, right? So the prices can vary anywhere between this line, right? Because that's the demand curve, right? Not quantity demanded, but the demand. So the prices within here are the one that he can pay, right? At the equilibrium here is where we know that usually the forces of supply and demand will foresee the price to go to the equilibrium, right? Every time, right? So that's the surplus, right? Because this is basically, I would say that the actual probably, right? Not really the actual, but is between the actual and basically whatever is willing, right? He's willing to pay within this, right? Same applies with this one, right? Uh, eh, Same applies with this one. This part of it is what we are calling the consumer. So the difference between what one is winning and the actual is the surplus that we're talking about. So when it comes to this graph, that's how we are showing it. This is the consumer surplus, while the top one is what is called, rather this is the producer surplus, and what the top one is what we're calling the consumer surplus. Not really difficult concepts and not often examined, but something that we have to know, right? Something that we have to know. Now, let's look at price legislations. Price legislation. So when you're talking about legislation, is just talking about regulations or rules or laws, right? In other words, price laws, price law. So this is a law passed by the government to regulate the price in the country with the aim of protecting both the consumers and producers. So there are actually laws that are enacted by the government, right, to make sure that it protects the consumers and producers. Right now that we've understood what the definition is, right, now you can start to relate, right? For example, the government might say that no one will sell maize above, let's say, 25,000. So what's happening is that it is basically what, protecting the consumers, right? Protecting the consumers, right? Or sometimes it might say that no one is going to buy maize from any producer less than 30,000. This is protecting the producers. So these laws are set by the government to protect either the producers or the consumers. But it's basically the government is regulating at what prices are the goods and services being produced or supplied or bought at. So basically that's it. So the government introduced this regulation either for the two reasons: to maximize price for the goods as part of anti-inflationary economic policy, such as price and income policies. This is usually aimed at protecting the consumer. So what they are trying to do is to make sure that they are maximizing, right? They are maximizing the price of the goods. This is actually leaning towards the suppliers, right? Rather the consumers, right? So in other words, they will set a ceiling or a maximum figure for such, right? That's why we're saying that no one is going to sell maize above 25,000 a bag, right? So what they're trying to do, these are part of inflationary economic policy. Tikamaza ona what inflation is just basically the rising price of goods in an economy, right? So kuopa kuti anthu akweza mitengo awo kwambiri, right, they will set this ceiling or maximum figure at which people will be buying their goods. So they're trying to what? Trying to make sure that they control inflation, right? Inflation. So basically, that's the first reason, trying to protect consumers by make sure that they are maximizing the price of goods as part of the inflationary economic policies. The second thing is to basically set minimum prices of goods, right? Set minimum prices of goods, right? So the other one was to set maximum prices. This one is to set minimum prices. So this is definitely trying to protect the supply, the producers, right? So in this case, they'll say that nobody will buy maize less than 25,000, right? So it means that all producers will have to make sure nobody will buy from any producer, any farmer less than 25,000, right? So basically, if you do such, you have basically you have infringed a law, right? So basically, those are the two reasons why these price legislations are set to protect the producers and to protect the suppliers. Maximum price for the consumers and minimum price for the producers. Now, let's look at each in turn. Let's look at each item. Let's look at maximum prices, right? So we know that maximum prices is to protect the consumer, right? To protect the consumer, right? So the government tried to prevent price of goods from rising by establishing the price ceilings. The term used is the price ceiling, right? So this will actually protect the consumer. So you know how the ceiling works, right? So like ceiling ya nyumba is basically trying to say that that's basically maximum space in a sort of a room, right? So you can see the ceiling in Makabebo. So it's basically saying that nothing will go beyond that, right? The room yachabaminebo. That's called a maximum, and this is called the price ceiling, right? On protecting that the consumer. So if the price ceiling is higher than the equilibrium price, setting a price ceiling will have no effect at all on the operations of the market. So let's look at what they are trying to do. So they have brought this concept again, right? They have brought this concept again of equilibrium. So I'll go back to for us to sort of appreciate what we actually did. So we have this graph. So let's draw the supply curve. Let's draw the demand curve. This is what we are referring to as the equilibrium point, equilibrium pricing. So we are saying that a price ceiling or a price what? A maximum price, right? Is basically the maximum amount that consumers are supposed to buy the goods, right? So it's either it can be set above the equilibrium point, right? Or below the equilibrium point. So there's a problem if you set your maximum price above the equilibrium point. So what will happen is that right. So it will be irrational to basically set the maximum price above the equilibrium point. Because, for example, if we are going to say the equilibrium point is basically a bag is being sold at 50,000, right? At the equilibrium point, right? So you're setting the maximum price at 75, right? Nobody can sell a bag over 75,000. This is what will happen. You have set the price here, right? But we always know Naguti, the forces of supply and demand will force this to the equilibrium point. So you can so it basically you're not protecting anyone because the forces of demand and supply will force this back to the equilibrium point. We talked about that. Because Manaudi maximum price in the 75, what will happen is that the suppliers will increase, right? While the suppliers will increase while the demand will fall, right? Forcing there to be a lot of suppliers on the market. So it will force the price to go down again. So at this point right there, on the equilibrium point, it would be it would be nonsense to put it above here because you're not protecting anyone. Because my forces on demand will force it even lower to the what? To 50,000. So, paibe chimene mwapanga zeni. Right? You haven't protected anyone because even the forces of demand will do it better off, right? Because the forces will bring at the price at 50,000, right? Because there will be a lot of what? A lot of suppliers on the market, but less demand for it. So because there are a lot of people, less people looking for the good, what will happen is that the suppliers will have to be fighting for the customers. What will happen? They will have to reduce until it goes back to the equilibrium. So the better place to place this called a ceiling, right? Ceiling is below the equilibrium point. That way it works. That way it works. How? Because what we're saying is if the forces of supply and demand are way above here. That's where it can set what? Set the market price or the prevailing price, because equilibrium most time the market price will be based on the equilibrium or the force so the market price will be around here, right? On the equilibrium point, right? So if you are setting it below, let's say when it was 40,000, no one is supposed, now it makes sense, right? Because now you are indeed protecting people from this 10,000. This 10,000. Now this will benefit people, right? This will benefit consumers. So it is ideal for you to basically what? To basically set it below if you are to protect anyone. So the question is, okay, mwapanga set below the equilibrium point. Won't it force it to go up to the equilibrium point? That's where it's called a law, right? It's a law. Because with the law and agoba, could I see ababa? A market price, right? Agoba could I give a bobo. So although even they're not good now, because they have set it below, you can see when noted the quantities right here. At first it was on the Q, equilibrium quantity, right? Now the supply will go down to A, right? What will happen is that the supply will go down to A and to ambili akausa ubanga supply. But the demand will go to B at this point, right? A lot of people will want to buy because at chipisa. So pakanga everybody mismatch, right? There's a high demand, low supply, right? People over the disequilibrium. So how does the government try to fix this? Although they're trying to sort of solve one problem, they are creating another problem. Rationing. Rationing imakauna kuti amanena kuti aliyense amapasidwa a maximum number of items angagule, right? So they would say kuti this is happening kwambiri munatese kuti ad market, so atana kuti they have put the market price thumba likugulitsa 50,000. So what they put a maximum price kunena kuti ife kwadi market zikugulitsa bwanji 40,000. So kauri kuli anthu ambirimbiri amene akufuna kugula. So because what they will say everyone will be buying one bag. Rationing. Kuli aliyense zinkwane. Aliyense zinkwane. Right? That's what they're doing, right? They're rationing because mukango pega freedom, it means anthu ena akazigula zambiri. So kopa zimenezo they will ration, right? So they have put a maximum price, right? That means it's basically selling below the market price. So then they'll put a ration. Kuti aliyense zinkwane. Aliyense zinkwane. So that's basically it, right? That's how it works. That's the maximum price. So you want to make sure that you put it below the equilibrium point, right? For it to be effective. Above the equilibrium point, it will not be effective because the forces of market, forces of supply and demand will still bring down the below that price, right? It will go back to the equilibrium point. While because you've put a ceiling only below equilibrium point, yes, the forces will try to push it, but because there is a law, right? There is a law. No one will go above the law, right? No one will go above the law. So what happens with this mismatch? High demand, less supply, right? So they'll create this ration, right? A maximum amount a person can basically consume or buy, right? To make sure that it is basically enough for everyone. Now, let's talk about the minimum price. So the minimum price, the other name is called the floor, right? The floor. Nothing can go below that, right? We know per floor banyumba, we can never go below that, right? Although unless ngadiri yeah upstairs, but I'm saying the floor is the minimum that you can be on there in the house, right? Or in the room, right? So basically that's it. It is trying to produce what? It protect the what? The producer, right? Pro price. So for this to work is vice versa, right? It's vice versa. For this to work, you definitely want to make sure that you put your minimum price above the equilibrium price. Above the equilibrium point. Because if you put it below the equilibrium point, right, in an ordinary supplies, imagine kuna kuti mabanga kuti ma supplies samagule less than 25,000. So what will happen is kuti mana yakuti samagule less than 25,000. Yoka we know kuti even per market sanga kugule because the equilibrium point is at this point. So it doesn't make sense. You're not protecting which you cannot even. The actual forces of supply and demand will not allow you to even go above. Let's say the equipment was 50,000 there. Will not allow you for the product to sell below that one. Right? Those are what the market is basically actually saying, right? The forces of supply and demand. So you're not even protecting the suppliers there. For it to work, it has to be above. Because we know per market, you know, yes, and twice it could have 50,000. But because manina kantengoka above, now it's like you are now Mugabanga to protect my supplies. Put as the grid was into super tengobe. What we know than the market price. So basically, that's what they would do. Right? That's what they would do. In that way, it's just a law. It is just a law. For example, you say, Muna Tobago, I'm a greeter, Pantenguina Wagi. Per market, it's already in 1,000. That's when our government wrote, okay, we want our suppliers Muzagulapa 1.2. As a law. That way they are protecting them, right? They are protecting them. So basically, it's useless if you're going to set it below the equilibrium point. You want to make sure that you set it above the equilibrium point. It's tricky that way. It's tricky. Ceiling it was already makara kumwamba, right? Ceiling imakhala kumwamba, koma tikunena kuti pa graph iyi ikuyenera kukhala kutiko below the equilibrium point. Right? Maximum ikuyenera kukhala. Wow, minimum ikuyenera kukhala. It's sort of zobalitsa mututepeza kuti wasokoneza kuti maximum ikuyenera kukhala kutiko ikuyenera kukhala kuntundako. No. It works the other way, right? I hope you understand the whole concept, right? You are trying to protect the producers. So the other way is basically to set the price above the market price. That way, producers will get a favorable price. While the ceiling, you're trying to protect the producers, so you want to set it below the market price or the equilibrium price. So that way, you are trying to protect these guys. Right. So now let's look at the black market. This is not a new word, right? The black market. Or nthawi imene mafuta amasowa, right? Umanguva fixation kulipo koma pa black market, right? Mumachizo kuti pa black market amagulisa zinthu overpriced, amazigulisa one zimakhala kuti it's illegal, komanso amazigulisa pa mtengo wambiri. So let's look at what the black market is all about. So first thing Muzori, this is an illegal market. Okay, time any mafuta kusowa, one thing is another simu kwenda kuti muzisonga mafuta mumanyumba magulisa, it's illegal hata kugwira nsoni. Right? So that's why we're not kamana kuti mafuta wakugula pa black market, it's an illegal, right? So this is an illegal market which normal market price higher than the legally imposed ceiling. So what you're saying is one, mubanga zinzosoyandira mulo. So it is an illegal market in which the normal market price is higher than the legally imposed prices. So boma alola una kuti zinthu zigulidwa pa mtengo wakuti anapanga seti kuti lita iliyonse currently for example ikhale pa 2000 pa illegal market time inamasowa anthu mpaka amalipira 5000 8000 per liter, right? So you can see what one is illegal, two, they are trying to set their market price above the legally imposed price or the legally imposed ceilings, right? So basically, that's the black market in simple terms, right? In simple terms. So how does the black market come about? So the black market will actually come about because there's a shortage of a commodity. For example, mafuta ya kusoa, right? Black market, or there's high demand or excess demand of a commodity, right? So some consumers are prepared to pay higher than the ordinary price of the goods or services. That's how it actually comes about, right? So when there is a shortage, higher prices act as rationing devices. For example, tickets for a major sporting event, but for quantity A, they are prepared to pay price Z, which is well above the official price M. The black marketers step in to exploit the gap. The commodity may be sold at the official price M, but the black market may sell at the other price. So basically that's it. Mafuta ya kusowa, we know kuti mafuta amapezeka bwanji pa 1999 per liter, right? Anthu ena akagula kumene kwa asungu, iwe kuwafunisisa kwambiri ufuna upite kwina kwake, you can't walk around without a car, you will be willing to even pay 8,000 per liter. That's the black market. So they're trying to exploit this shortage, right? Official market, ukapeza ku filling station ukapeza beba 199. Commerce ukapeza because of so, right? The other guys on the black market will sell it at 1,000, 8,000, right? That's how they exploit the market, right? So when there's excess supply over demand, there's a danger that more goods will be produced than they can be sold at the minimum price. Therefore, surplus quantity will be sold at lower price. To prevent oversurplus and dumping of excess surplus at lower price, a system of production patterns might be introduced, and this is where each supplier is allowed to produce up to the maximum quantity and no more. So the other thing is where there's the shortage, we've seen what is happening, right? People will charge more, right, on the black market. But sometimes there might be an excess, right? Excess production. A lot of people have produced more than the demand for that product, right? It means now people will charge less or less than the minimum price. They will charge less than the minimum price because there are less people that want it, right? So they might be willing to just to make sure that they sell it. So how does the government intervene when it comes to this? So how the government does it is by introducing quotas. So quotas is the same as rationing, but this time around rationing yake kuchitika kwa suppliers. So quotas is saying what is the maximum each producer can produce, right? So they might say that each producer cannot produce more than, let's say, 100 kg of tobacco, bas. So basically, they will have a maximum. So in other words, they will actually control the supply on the market. It's just basically, so when we say rationing, it's for consumers. Amount that you can buy. Quotas is amount that you can produce. But in all situations, we are saying that they are setting the maximum quantity to produce or to buy. So basically, that's to do with the black market and any shortage and any surplus. So we stop here. Thank you.